In the Muffin Read series, I intend to take you on journeys into myths, legends, and other fascinating stories from the past in a bite-sized, easy-to-digest, and complicated way. Some of these stories you may be recognised from the telly or movies, but don't worry, we won't need tens of hours to tell them, and only special effects needed are those of your own imagination. The first Muffin Reads I've selected, and feel free to suggest future reads, is the Saga of the Volsungs. This is an influential tale, actually a series of connected tales, that has fed into the works of Wagner, Tolkien, and many more. If you've jumped into this episode first, please wind back and pick up parts 1 and 2, links in the description, and then jump back to continue this fascinating tale. Into his old age, King Sigmund visited a king named Eilimi. He had a daughter, Hjordis, that Sigmund wished to marry. However, another king, Lyngvi, also prized Hjordis for his bride. Knowing Hjordis had wisdom, Eilimi bade her to choose between these two suitors, and she chose Sigmund as the most famous among them, despite his age. And so, Sigmund and Hjordis were married, and the couple returned to Hunland with Eilimi. But Lyngvi was a jealous sort, and raised an army against Sigmund. Sigmund sent Hjordis into the forests for safety during the fighting, and the smaller army that he led with Eilimi met the large force that Lyngvi had brought. The fighting was fierce, and Sigmund always led from the front. Despite his age, he fought with valour and skill, and none could lay blade upon him. But then a stranger appeared in the battle, with a wide-brimmed hat, having one eye, and carrying a spear. The stranger came against Sigmund, and when Sigmund brought his sword against the stranger, it was blocked with spear, against which it shattered. Sigmund's luck went at that point, and although he urged his men on, his forces were cut down around him. King Sigmund and King Eilimi fell that day. Most of Sigmund's men died on the field with him. King Lyngvi advanced into Sigmund's kingdom, but could find neither wealth nor the woman that he had invaded to gain. On the battlefield, Hjordis came to the dying Sigmund, and he told her, "Odin does not want me to fight any longer. He has taken my sword from me. But you carry the hope of the Volsungs with you. You have my son. Keep him safe. Take the shards of the sword that I drew from Branstock. He will forge a greater sword, and he will call it Gram." And despite her pleas, asking him to let her heal him, Sigmund refused, and he died. Hjordis spoke to her thrall, and asked her to exchange clothes, so that she might appear less noble and better hide Sigmund's unborn son. Shortly, King Alf, son of King Hjelprek of Denmark, arrived at the battlefield. They had come to raid, but recognized that a fight of great importance had occurred. He found Hjordis and her thrall, and asked them what had happened here. The bondswoman answered, and told the tale of King Sigmund and his last of his battles. Then King Alf asked where the king's wealth had been hidden, and the bondswoman and Hjordis led them to that place. Alf thus returned to his kingdom with a great treasure, and, unknowingly, Hjordis the queen, further denying Lyngvi his spoils. Now Alf's mother, the queen, had observed Hjordis and her bondswoman. Remember that the bondswoman was pretending to be the noble woman, since her son had brought them to court, and asked them, "It looks to me that the fairer of these two wears the least jewellery and the least fine clothing. Why is that?" Alf admitted that he had noticed this too, pointing out that, "I have seen that the manner of the servant is actually more fitting a noble woman than that of her mistress. She knew the proper forms of address when we met, and how to act in noble company. I think we will test this out." During one evening's drinking in the hall, Alf asked Hjordis' bondswoman, "How do you know the dawn is coming if you cannot see the heavenly bodies?" She replied, "When I was a child, I used to drink quite a bit before dawn. When I grew up and stopped this, I still woke up at the same time, and from that, I know when dawn is coming." Alf smiled and replied, "That isn't a good habit for a king's daughter." he asked Hjordis the same question. She answered, "My father gave me a small gold ring, which grew cold on my finger just before daybreak." To which Alf replied, "Gold must have been common in your kingdom, if even a servant girl wore it. You have disguised yourself long enough. I know now that you are the daughter of a king. I would have taken you both as noble daughters, if you had told me that. But as I now know the truth, I will do better. You will be my bride, and I will pay your dowry once your child has been born." Hjordis then told Alf the whole truth of the matter, and she was accepted at court with much honour and worth. She and Alf married, and in time she gave birth to her son. That son was brought before King Hjálprik, Alf's father, who was impressed. The boy was named Sigurd, and it was said that no one could match him in his conduct and his size. Hjálprik raised him in his court, and everyone loved him. The king, true to Alf's word, gave Alf the hand of Hjordis and paid her dowry. Regin, son of Hreidmar, was given Sigurd as his foster son, and he set about teaching him sports and chess, and the writing and meaning of the runes. He taught him how to speak different languages, and many subjects beside these. One day, Regin asked Sigurd if he knew how much wealth his father had, and who guarded it. Sigurd replied that Hjálprik's kings guarded it. Regin asked if he trusted them. Sigurd responded by saying, "They can watch over it better than I can, but I can take from it whenever I want to." They had this conversation all along the lines more than once, with Regin teasing Sigurd about choosing to live modestly instead of with the riches of his father. Sigurd kept to his line. "I can take from it whenever I want to." "Prove it," said Regin. "Ask them for a horse." "When it suits me, I shall," replied Sigurd. And so Sigurd went to the kings and asked them to give him a horse. "Choose a horse for yourself," they said, "and anything else we possess." The following day, Sigurd went into the forest, where he came across an old man with a long beard who was a stranger to him. The man asked Sigurd where he was going, and Sigurd told him that he was going to choose a horse. He also asked the man if he could help him do this. "We will drive the horses to the deep river Busidjon," said the old man in reply, and so they did. All but one of the horses swam ashore, and it was this large, handsome grey that he chose. The old man told him that none had ever managed to mount this horse before. "It is descended from Sleipnir, Odin's steed. Raise it with care, and it will be the best of horses." And with those words, he vanished. Sigurd named the horse Grani, and it did indeed become the greatest horse. But still, Regin teased him. "Why do you live like an errand boy, when there is wealth and honour to be had easily for one such as you?" Sigurd asked him how he might do so, and Regin told him of a place known as the Gnitahith, the wealth there, and a serpent known as Fafnir that guarded it. "That name is known to me," said Sigurd, "and it is no small feat to defeat such a monster." Regin continued to tease him. "Fafnir would be nothing but a grass snake to one who carried the true blood of the Volsungs. Perhaps you lack something of the spirit of your ancestors." "I am not long an adult," Sigurd responded. "Yet you tease and urge me on like this. Why do you do this?" And Regin replied with a tale. "My father, Hredni, had 3 sons. I was the third, skilled in metalwork and could always make something useful. My middle brother was Otter, who took on the likeness of an otter during the day, and was a superb fisherman. My eldest brother was Fafnir, the largest and fiercest of us. He was so greedy that he named everything as belonging to him. A dwarf named Andvari often lurked in the pool of the waterfall that bears his name, in the form of a pike, and my brother, Otter, often hunted there too, as the pool held so many fish. Otter caught a salmon, and was eating it on the bank of the pool when Odin, Loki, and Hrungnir came upon him. Loki picked up a stone and threw it at what he thought was a simple otter, killing it. Impressed by the quality of the animal, they skinned it and continued on their journey. As evening drew, they came to Hrednir's home, and they showed my father and myself the skin of the otter that they had proudly killed. But as it was no longer day, the skin had turned back to Otter's true form. Enraged for the killing, we demanded that reparations be made, to which the three Aesir agreed. We told them to fill Otter's skin with gold until it stood, and after that to pile gold around it until it was completely hidden. They sent Loki to fetch the gold. He went to Ran and borrowed her net. This he cast into the waterfall's pool, and he caught Andvari the pike. He demanded that the dwarf gave over all of his gold before he would set him free, which he did, except for one ring that Andvari tried to hide. Loki noticed and took the ring for himself before casting the dwarf back into the pool. Before disappearing into the depths of the pool, Andvari laid a curse on his gold and the ring, that death would come to anyone that possessed them. Loki returned with the gold, and the Aesir filled Otter's skin until it stood, and then piled it around until it was hidden. Hredmir saw that one whisker was still visible. Odin drew the ring and Varanalt from Loki and placed it onto the pile to hide that whisker. The reparations paid, the Aesir went to leave. But as they went, Loki called back, "You may have been paid, but no ease will you find. Death comes to those that claim that gold." And this is true. Shortly afterwards, Fafnir murdered my father and took the gold. He has become twisted and evil by the possession of it, turning into the fell serpent of which you have heard. And that is why I urge you to seek Fafnir and his treasure, which is known as the Otter's ransom, after the tragedy that befell my brother. Sigurd agreed then to seek out Fafnir and slay him. "Forge a sword for me," he asked Regin, "using all of your skill so that the blade can match this dragon you would have me face." And this Regin did, and came to Sigurd with the sword that he had fashioned. Sigurd brought the sword down onto Regin's anvil, and it broke. "You must do better, Regin," Sigurd demanded. And so Regin forged a second sword, and Sigurd again broke Regin's work across his own anvil. Parting from Regin with angry words, Sigurd went to Hjordis, his mother. "Do you have the fragments of King Sigmund's sword, Gram?" he asked. Hjordis replied that she did, indeed, having kept them safe. She gave the fragments to Sigurd, who returned to Regin. "Take these. Reforge a sword from them," demanded Sigurd. Regin was angry, believing Sigurd was belittling his skill in craftwork, but he took the fragments and worked his forge with them. To his apprentices, it seemed as if the forge's fire enveloped the blade as it formed, the sword's edges appearing to emanate flame. Once the work was done, Regin brought the newly reforged Gram to Sigurd. The hero brought the sword down upon the anvil as he had done with the previous blades, but this time the sword hewed the anvil in two. Sigurd was satisfied. "Now that I have forged your sword," Regin said, "you must fulfill your vow and slay Fafnir." "This I will do," replied Sigurd, "but first I must avenge my father." Sigurd went to visit Gripir, his mother's brother, who could see the future. He asked Gripir to tell him of his own future, which Gripir refused to do. Sigurd pressed on, and eventually Gripir gave in, and told him how his entire future would be fated, exactly how we will tell it. After receiving this knowledge, he again met with Regin, who asked him to keep his promise to kill Fafnir. "I will," said Sigurd, "but still I must avenge my father, King Sigmund, and my other relatives that fell with him." To keep that vow, Sigurd left the court of Hjalprek and Alf and headed out to seek the sons of Hunding. All of the kings of the court helped Sigurd prepare, giving him supplies and raising an army. By the end of the preparations, Sigurd's fleet of warriors was the most magnificent that had ever been seen, and Sigurd himself led it from a mighty dragon ship with finely crafted and embroidered sails. When they set sail, it seemed that even the weather approved of their expedition. Sigurd commanded his fleet bravely, urging them on with full sail even when storms broke. At the headland, an old man called out and asked whose army he was seeing, and on being told that it was of Sigurd, son of Sigmund, he asked for passage on one of the ships. They took him aboard, and when asked for his name, he said, "You may address me as Feng or Fjolnir." After taking the old man aboard, the storm died, and they had fair weather until they reached the realms of the sons of Hunding. When they did so, Fjolnir Odin again, in one of his guises, vanished. And so the battle between Sigurd's army and the sons of Hunding began. As Sigurd pushed onwards, the men ran before him, coming to King Lingvi to tell him of the ferocious horde that was advancing towards him. And so Lingvi put out his own army, and with his brothers beside him he went forth to face Sigurd. The battle was fierce, and many were slain. Sigurd faced Lingvi, and with Gram he cleaved through his enemy's helm, his head, and his armour, until he fell dead in 2 pieces. He did similarly to Hjolvard, and Gram took the lives of all remaining sons of Hunding. And when all was done, Sigurd returned home with the plunder that he had gained through war. A great celebration was held, during which Regin reminded him, "Now you have had your father's vengeance. You must keep your promise to slay Fafnir." Sigurd replied, "I have not forgotten, and I will keep my promise." So it was that Regin led Sigurd to the heath over which Fafnir travelled on his way to drink. And Sigurd saw the tracks that Fafnir had made on the land, and said to Regin, "You told me that Fafnir was a mere serpent, but these tracks show him to be much larger." Regin teased him in return. "If you are worried about the size of your foe, then the blood of your ancestors must be weak in you." They came to a cliff, on which Fafnir rested to drink, and again Sigurd remarked on the size that Fafnir must be. "My advice to you," replied Regin, "is to dig a ditch across Fafnir's path and hide in it. When Fafnir comes over your ditch, you can stab him from below." Sigurd had reservations about this. "How will I avoid the dragon's blood in such a ditch?" "I can't tell you everything," replied Regin. So Sigurd dug his ditch. While he was digging, an old man with a long beard, Odin again, of course, looked down at Sigurd in his ditch. "That's not the best idea," he said. "It would be better to dig several ditches for the dragon's blood to drain into." Then, as usual, he disappeared. Sigurd saw the wisdom of this, and so he dug more ditches around the path, and then hid in one of them. Along came Fafnir, a giant serpent dragon, along the path to his drinking place, roaring and spewing his poisonous breath. As he slithered over Sigurd's ditch, the hero thrust up with Gram, sinking it up to the hilt, piercing a mortal blow. Fafnir thrashed in his death throes, destroying all around, his blood draining into the pits that Sigurd had prepared, until the monster lay exhausted and dying.
"Who are you to have killed me so?"
he demanded of Sigurd. "I am Sigurd, son of Sigmund," Sigurd replied.
"Who persuaded you to do this deed?"
the dying dragon demanded. And after some discourse, Sigurd revealed that it was Regin that had urged him to do the deed. Fafnir responded,
"So he wishes my brother's inheritance. Know this, hero. My treasure is death to all who would possess it. Regin has led you to your doom."
And with that, Fafnir died. Once Fafnir was dead, Regin returned to the scene. He hailed Sigurd and the heroic deed that he had performed, but then stood quietly for a while. Then he spoke, and he said, "You have slain my brother, and I am not blameless in this deed." Sigurd responded, saying, "You were quite a distance away when I killed this dragon. You could not have achieved this, nor could anyone else for that matter. But it was I that reforged Gram that you used to pierce the dragon, and I that led you to this place, and it was me that urged you to this deed. I am not blameless." Sigurd cut out Fafnir's heart, while Regin drank his brother's blood. Regin then asked Sigurd for another favour. "Take the heart and roast it, and then let me have it to eat." So Sigurd took the heart to their fire, spitted it and roasted it. To test it, he stuck his finger into the heart and then sucked the blood and juices from that finger. When the blood from the heart touched his tongue, he found that he could understand the speech of birds. He heard the birds speak around him. "Sigurd should eat the heart, then he will gain great wisdom. Sigurd should beware, for Regin will betray him. Sigurd should slay Regin and claim Fafnir's hoard for himself," and much of this like. Having heard the birds, Sigurd vowed that he would not let Regin betray him. He ate a portion of Fafnir's heart, keeping some, and returned to Regin, Instead of giving the heart to him, Sigurd instead drew Gram and used the sword to take off Regin's head. He then followed the mighty trail left by Fafnir across the heath, eventually finding the serpent's lair. Within, he found an enormous pile of gold, as well as the sword known as Thlotti, the helm of terror, and a coat of gold mail. He took all of the gold and placed it into 2 large chests, then harnessed these to his horse, Grani. But Grani would not move. Sigurd tried whipping him to no avail. Only when Sigurd mounted the horse and pressed him with spurs did Grani move, pulling the huge chests behind him with no trouble at all. And so, we have met Sigurd. We have seen some of his heroic deeds. And in the next episode, we will recount the tragedy of Brynhild and Sigurd, and see the beginning of the treachery that will eventually bring about the downfall of the Volsungs. Remember to subscribe and switch notifications on so that you will know when that episode goes up. And until then...